I was 73 years old when I learned that silence in a family is never empty. It is always full of everything no one has the courage to say out loud. My name is Eleanor. Most people call me Ellie, which I have always liked because it sounds softer than my full name, the way life feels softer when you are finally too tired to fight it. I live in a small town in Ohio, in a house my husband built with his own hands 46 years ago. He has been gone for 12 years now, but I still find his fingerprints in unexpected places. On the underside of the kitchen cabinets, on the doorframe of the pantry, where he measured our children's heights, on the window latch in the bedroom that never worked quite right, and he never got around to fixing. My son Daniel is 38. He is a good man. I mean that genuinely, not the way mothers say it when they are trying to convince themselves. He calls me every Sunday. He sends flowers on my birthday. He helped me figure out how to use the new television remote when the old one broke, and he only lost his patience once. But Daniel married a woman named Vanessa 12 years ago, and somewhere along the way, I stopped being his mother and started being a problem he didn't know how to solve. Vanessa is our villain. I want to make that clear before I tell you what happened. She is a woman who loves my son and my grandchildren. She keeps a clean house and volunteers at the school book fair and remembers to send thank you cards after Christmas. She is also, I have come to understand, a woman who has never quite forgiven me for existing in a space she believes belongs to her. The trouble started slowly, the way most trouble does. Small things. A comment about how I held the baby too long. A sigh when I suggested a different pediatrician than the one she had chosen. A look, brief and sharp, when Daniel hugged me goodbye and she was standing in the doorway watching. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself every mother-in-law feels this way. I told myself Vanessa was just protective, just tired, just adjusting to having another woman in her orbit. I told myself so many things that I started to believe the story I was writing was true. Then came the hospital. I had a fall in March. Nothing dramatic. I was carrying laundry down to the basement, the same laundry I had carried down those same steps thousands of times before, and my foot slipped on the third step from the bottom. I landed hard on my left hip. The pain was immediate and terrible, the kind of pain that doesn't let you breathe until you remember that breathing is the only thing keeping you alive. I lay on the concrete floor for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 15 minutes. My phone was upstairs on the kitchen counter. The basement smelled like detergent and dust, and something else, something old and metallic that I realized after a while was the smell of my own fear. I managed to crawl to the bottom of the steps. I couldn't stand. I couldn't reach the railing. So I sat there on the cold concrete, my hip throbbing, and I waited. I waited because waiting was the only thing I could do. Eventually, around 4 in the afternoon, the mailman saw my back door standing open and called out to ask if everything was all right. I told him no. He called an ambulance. The paramedics were kind. They put a blanket over me even though I wasn't cold, and one of them, a young woman with purple streaks in her hair, held my hand and told me I was going to be fine. I was not fine. The doctors said I had fractured my hip. I needed surgery and then rehabilitation, at least 6 weeks, probably longer. I would not be able to go home right away. I would need help. I would need someone to stay with me, or I would need to go to a facility. The word facility hung in the air like smoke, acrid and impossible to ignore. Daniel arrived at the hospital that evening. He looked scared. He always looks scared when something happens to me, which is both comforting and heartbreaking. He held my hand and told me everything would be okay. He said he would figure something out. He said Vanessa would help. I wanted to believe him. I have spent most of my life wanting to believe things that turned out not to be true. Vanessa came the next day. She brought flowers, which I appreciated, and a magazine about home organization, which I did not. She sat in the chair beside my bed and smiled, and asked how I was feeling. Her smile was perfect. It always is. That is how I know it is not real. We talked for about 20 minutes. The kids, school, Daniel's work, the weather. Ordinary things. Things that keep the surface smooth, while everything underneath churns and shifts. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, and said she needed to step outside to take the call. She left her purse on the floor beside the bed. She left her phone on the tray table. She left in a hurry, the way people do when they think whatever is happening outside the room is more important than whatever is happening inside it. The phone buzzed again. And then again. I did not mean to look. I am not a person who snoops. I have lived long enough to know that other people's secrets are heavy, and I have carried enough weight already. But the phone was right there, face up, and the notifications kept appearing, and I could not help but see the words that flashed across the screen. It was a group chat. Vanessa and 2 other women, their names unfamiliar. The message that appeared said this: she is playing the victim again. A hospital stay is just an excuse. She wants Daniel to feel guilty, so he will beg her to move in with us. I am not falling for it. I stared at the words. They blurred and then cleared and then blurred again. I was not crying. My eyes were just watering. That is what I told myself. Another message appeared. This one from one of the other women. She said, "Stay strong. You knew what you were getting into when you married a mama's boy." Vanessa's reply came a moment later. She said, "I just wish she would disappear sometimes." Is that terrible? I don't want her dead. I just want her to stop being so present. Every holiday, every birthday, every school event. She is always there. She is like a shadow I can't shake. The third woman replied with a laughing emoji and then said, "You are so patient." I would have lost my mind years ago. I put my hands in my lap. I looked at the wall. I counted the tiles on the ceiling. There were 47. I counted them twice to make sure. 47 white tiles with tiny brown speckles, arranged in rows that did not quite line up at the edges. Someone had done a sloppy job. Someone had not cared enough to make them straight. I understood that feeling. The feeling of caring when no one else does. The feeling of trying to make things line up and failing, because the foundation was wrong from the beginning. Vanessa came back a few minutes later. She picked up her phone, glanced at it, and slipped it into her purse. She did not look at me. She asked if I needed anything before she left. I said no. I said thank you for the flowers. She smiled her perfect smile and walked out of the room, and I listened to her footsteps fade down the corridor, and I did not call after her. I did not say anything. I just sat there in the hospital bed with my fractured hip and my fractured heart, and I wondered how many years I had been a shadow without knowing it. Daniel came that evening. He brought soup from the cafeteria, which was too salty and had vegetables I did not recognize floating in it. I ate it anyway, because eating gave me something to do with my hands. He asked how I was feeling. I said fine. He asked if Vanessa had been helpful. I said she had been very kind. He smiled. He looked relieved. He said he had been worried about how I would handle the recovery, but Vanessa had a plan. She had been researching rehabilitation facilities. She had found one that was very nice, very professional, very close to their house so he could visit often. I asked Daniel what he thought about the plan. He said he thought it was a good plan. He said Vanessa was so good at this kind of thing, at organizing and coordinating and making sure everything was taken care of. He said I was lucky to have her. I said yes. I was lucky. I said the word lucky, and it tasted like the soup, too salty and full of things I could not identify. The rehabilitation facility was called Golden Meadows. It was not golden, and there were no meadows. It was a long building with beige walls and a linoleum floor that smelled like bleach and something else, something sweet and chemical that was supposed to cover the smell of old age, but only made it worse. My room was small. A bed, a nightstand, a window that looked out at the parking lot. A television mounted on the wall that played the same game shows on a loop. The nurses were kind but overworked. The physical therapists were patient but rushed. The other residents were old, older than me, their faces slack with resignation or sharp, with the kind of loneliness that makes people mean. I stayed at Golden Meadows for 8 weeks. 8 weeks of cold coffee and lukewarm meals. 8 weeks of watching the same parking lot, the same cars coming and going, the same families visiting and leaving. Daniel came every Tuesday and Thursday. He always brought flowers, different colors each time, and I always thanked him and put them in the plastic cup on my nightstand where they wilted within days, because no one remembered to change the water. Vanessa came twice. The first time she brought the kids, And I watched my grandchildren look around the facility with wide, frightened eyes, and I hated that they had to see me this way. The second time she came alone. She sat in the chair beside my bed for exactly 23 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. She asked about my physical therapy. She asked when I thought I might be discharged. She said Daniel was working so hard, and she was worried about him. She said she hoped I understood that everyone was doing their best. I said I understood. I said everyone was doing their best. I said those words, and I watched her face, and I wondered if she could see that I knew. If she could feel, somewhere in her chest, that the shadow she wanted to shake had heard everything. She left after 23 minutes. She kissed my cheek. Her lips were dry and cold. The day I was discharged, Daniel came to pick me up. He drove me back to my house, the house my husband built, the house that smelled like dust and detergent and old memories. He helped me inside. He put my bag on the bed. He stood in the kitchen and looked around at the dishes in the sink, and the mail piled on the counter, and the plant on the windowsill that had died while I was gone. He said he was sorry. He said he wished he could do more. He said Vanessa had been so stressed lately, with the kids and work and everything, and he did not want to add to her burden. I asked Daniel if he loved Vanessa. He looked surprised by the question. He said yes, of course, she was his wife. I asked if he was happy. He paused. He looked at the dead plant on the windowsill. He said he was tired. He said he was always tired. He said he did not remember the last time he felt like himself. I wanted to tell him about the voice note. I wanted to tell him what his wife had written. I wanted to say that I was not a shadow, that I was his mother, that I had held him when he was small and feverish and afraid of the dark, that I had worked double shifts to pay for his baseball cleats, that I had sat in the emergency room when he broke his arm at 12 and again, when he got into a car accident at 19, and again when his first child was born, and the doctors said there were complications. I wanted to say all of that. I wanted to say that I deserved more than 23 minutes in a beige room. I wanted to say that I was tired too, but I did not say any of it. Because I looked at my son, 38 years old, standing in the kitchen of the house where he learned to walk, and I saw that he was not ready. He was not ready to hear that the woman he loved had wished him away. He was not ready to choose, and I was not ready to make him. So I said something else. I said, "Thank you for picking me up." I said I would be fine on my own. I said he should go home to his family. He hugged me. He held on longer than usual. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. He did not say anything. He just turned and walked out the door, and I watched him drive away, and I stood in the doorway of my house until the sound of his car faded into nothing. That was 3 months ago. I am home now. My hip has healed, mostly. I walk with a cane on bad days and without one on good days. I have learned to carry laundry in a basket instead of a pile. I have learned to call a neighbor when I need something from the top shelf. I have learned to be alone without feeling lonely, although some days the loneliness still comes for me like a wave, pulling me under before I have time to breathe. Daniel still calls every Sunday. Vanessa does not. The flowers stopped arriving after I left the facility. I do not know if that was intentional or just an oversight. I have decided not to wonder about it anymore. Wondering is a kind of hoping, and I have used up most of my hope. I have not told Daniel about the voice note. I have not told anyone. The words live inside me now, the way my husband's fingerprints live on the door frames and the window latch. They are part of the architecture of my life. They have changed the shape of everything. But here is what I have learned, sitting in this house alone, watching the seasons change through the kitchen window. I have learned that love does not protect you from being hurt. I have learned that people can love you and still wish you would disappear. I have learned that being a shadow is not the worst thing in the world. At least shadows are present. At least shadows remind you that there is light somewhere, even if it is not shining on you. Sometimes, late at night, I think about what Vanessa wrote. I think about her sitting somewhere, typing those words on her phone, believing she was safe because no one would ever see. I think about how careful she was with her smile, and how careless she was with her cruelty. I think about how easy it is to hurt someone when you do not have to look them in the eye. And I think about what I would say to her if I had the courage. Not the angry words, not the hurt words, not the words that would make her defensive and Daniel miserable. Just one thing. Just this. I am not trying to take your place. I am not trying to take your husband, or your children, or your life. I am just an old woman in an old house, trying to hold on to the last pieces of a world that is slipping away from me. I am not a shadow. I am a mother. And mothers do not disappear just because you wish them away. But I will never say that to her, because some things are better left unsaid. Because silence, for all its weight, is sometimes the only gift we have left to give. Tonight, I made myself a cup of tea. I sat in my husband's chair, the one that still smells faintly like him if I press my face into the cushion. I looked at the photograph on the mantel, the one of Daniel at his high school graduation, his face young and unmarked by the exhaustion I saw in the kitchen 3 months ago. I wondered if he remembers who he was before he became so tired. I wondered if he remembers who I was before I became a shadow. Outside, the rain started. Soft at first, then harder. The sound filled the house, the way his voice used to fill the house, the way my own voice used to fill the house before I learned to be quiet. I listened to the rain, and I drank my tea, and I did not cry. I have done enough crying. I have done enough hoping. I have done enough waiting for people to see me when they have already decided to look the other way. I am 73 years old. My hip hurts when the weather changes. My hands shake when I pour the tea. The house is too big for one person and too full of memories to leave. I am a shadow to some, and a mother to one, and a mystery to myself most days. But I am still here, and that I have decided is enough. If this emotional story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my grandma voices for more real-life inspired family stories.